Hello, my dearly beloved brothers and sisters, all ages, greetings. My name is Virgil Wood, and on this day, April 4, 1968, I had been working with Martin Luther King for almost 10 years. And I want to share with you today why I believe we can resume his work that we have ignored for all of the intervening 55 years. Think about that. The man gave his life for something very specific. And we proceeded before he was cold in the ground to abandon his work. And we've done stuff in his name, all kinds of stuff, some good, but most of it irrelevant and even diversionary. Martin Luther King did not give his life for a whole lot of stuff we're doing in his name. Let's back up and start over. I had the privilege of working with him for 10 years, but 7 years ago, he wrote something to me that I want to share with you because it relates to why I believe our work with King in Boston, the Martin Luther King Boston work, the night he was assassinated, Boston was the only major city that did not riot that night. When the word came that he'd been shot, and then 2 hours later that he had died, Boston black leaders and white leaders and others gathered in my chapel that night. The young brothers walked in angry and overwhelmed with grief and said, "We're going to burn this motherfucker down tonight." And I said, "Come on in, young brothers, let's sit down and talk." And I said, if you do that, you will be dishonoring everything that King stood for. And not only that, you'll probably burn your own grandmother's neighborhood down because you're not accustomed to going downtown. You're only accustomed to circulating in your neighborhood. So if you do that, you will be destroying not only the legacy of King, but the neighborhood that your mothers and fathers have worked to build. And they settled in for the discussion with the old folks. That night, old people and young people talked together, and we reminisced about what King had meant to the old people, and they still had a dream. And we reminiscent of what King could mean to the young people, and they had a vision. And that vision was, beloved community, beloved economy. When community leads, a community of love leads, money follows. And when it leads one time frame, money starts chasing love. Love stays in the front, money keeps chasing. And so that is a major part of King's legacy to us. I had the delight of sharing a keynote. People who were there that night will know I'm telling the truth. It sounds like I'm making up stuff. I'm not. It was, I believe, February the 19th, 1968, just weeks before King's death. He had gathered 1,200 urban pastors from the barrios in Appalachia at Miami, North Miami, at the beach, old Sheraton 4 Ambassadors Hotel. Because my dear friend T.Y. Rogers of Sacred Memory was now the program director for SCLC, and he had engineered that I might have Thursday night keynote address, and my subject was the homegrown revolution. And I talked about Jesus going into the temple and destroying the merchandising that was going on in the house of prayer. And I said that our Poor People's Campaign needed not to go forward at this time, that we needed to give King and Louis Kelso an opportunity to work together for about a year or two. In the meantime, after 13 years of staccato activity, King had not had one sabbatical. He was due 2 sabbaticals. He had not had any sabbaticals. He was frazzled at that time. Those who know him know it well. And I said we should not go to Washington and beg for food stamps. We should make a deal with Wall Street where money is generated. Wall Street is about the whole loaf. Washington is about the crumbs. He said to me after the speech that night, he put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're right, but it's too late." He said, "We got to go on with it now because we've set it up." And he said, "But you stay with it." And that's what I've done. 2 years later, I was in Harvard University working on a doctorate in economics because I believed that what we had missed in our work of American civil rights was that we had gotten the spiritual part right, but we'd gotten the economic part. We had moved away from it because the first 50 years out of slavery, we created the beloved community. In the second 50 years, by 1965, we had created a black economy that was larger than the gross national product of white Canada, all Canada. Black people controlled their own economy until we went from autonomy to affiliation. And we gave away all of the gains that we had made under that second 50 years out of slavery. From 1915 to 1965, those institutions that we had created from 1865 to 1915, Virginia Union, Morehouse, and all of that, had created then the Wide Walkers and the Martin Luther Kings and the Virgil Woods and so forth, so that by 1965 we had a voter rights bill that had some teeth in it. We had an economy that we had control over. A governor, Andrew Bremer, the first black governor of the Federal Reserve Board, told us that we had an economy that was whole and growing. And we gave it away by affiliating away our advantages into something called, finally, that became called diversity, equity, and inclusion. That was a false move on our part to give away too much of what we had that was unique that America needs and become a part of what had already enslaved not only black people, but white poor people as well. The Martin Luther King's move was to help not only just black poor, but all poor folks. And he said on that last night at his speech at Memphis that we as a people will get to the promised land. And when he said we as a people will get to the promised land, he was not saying we as a black people, we as a white people, we as a brown, red, or yellow, we as a people, a Jubilee people. Now we must substitute the word Jubilee for all of the racial particularities, because it is not particularly about race, it's about caste. And so here we are now with the restart of Martin's dream. I like to say it was God's dream. Martin had borrowed it, and if he'd lived long enough, he'd started talking about God's dream. That's what Bishop Tutu finally said. South Africa copied our, I say, mistake. We made a political arrangement with the American constitutional community when we should have changed the playbook, which we could have done from 65 if we had not affiliated ourselves back into the whole morass that had enslaved us in the first place. What South Africa got wrong, because we got it wrong, we thought that if you change the players, you get a different play. You do not get a different play by changing the players. You got to change the playbook. That's where Wall Street and Back Street got to get together, where the super rich and the super poor got to get together at the same table. That's called the Martin Luther King Shepherd's Table. At that shepherd's table, every faith group must be there. But we're not there to deal with our creeds. We're there to deal with our deeds. The deed is how to save every child on planet Earth. Every child on planet Earth. That's what King was about, and all of the people who worked with him. But let me tell you this. Rosa Parks took it up after that. Nelson Mandela, the last years of his work, just like Rosa Parks, I worked with both of them. And what we now call saving every child on planet Earth. How do you do that? When you say saving, people think we're not talking religion at all there. We're talking about savoring, serving, and saving. That's when the spirituality and the economics come together. To go back to what I said about within 2 years of Martin's death, I had myself back in school to do a doctorate in economics and a doctorate in theology. I did a doctorate in theology at my graduate theological school, Andover Newton, which which today is greatly diminished from where it was back then, and a doctorate at Harvard, which I made it a doctorate in economics, although I did it through the School of Education, because I could go through Harvard in 3 years as a doctorate in education, having the opportunity to study with the greatest minds at Harvard, which I did. I'll call a few of them, Chris Odris, Dave McClellan, frontline intellect on creating what's now called community development and economics and spirituality, humanomics. I call it humanomics. Someone else has called it humanomics as well, a great scholar community. So I'm going to tell you, with a doctorate in theology, looking at Jubilee, a doctorate in economics, looking at beloved economy, I brought those together. I'm not interested in the academic accolades that go with that. In fact, I prefer to be called Grandpa 3 because my work is with the great little children of the world. I consider myself to be a student, a pupil in kindergarten beside the little children. When I go there to speak, and they introduce me, Dr. Wood, Harvard, all that kind of thing, I get up and I tell the little children, don't believe all of that. It's true, but don't worry about it. I'm here to be Grandpa 3 for a day if you let me. They get real excited. Little guys down on the front row look at me with a cross look, give me that dirty look. I say, that's okay, fellas. We're going to talk again later. And then they brighten up now. And I tell the children this. I tell them that the day you were born, God stopped everything God was doing and sang a song with your name in it. In other words, God took notice of your being born. Mama didn't know it had happened yet. Daddy certainly didn't know, but God knew it. And I tell them that story. When the session is over, the bell rings for these little children to go back to their classes. They have lined up around the wall. The teachers are trying to get them to go to class. They've lined up around the wall. And they're coming up with their little telephones, wanting a selfie and a hug. I'm going to tell you something. And I asked them if I can be Grandpa 3. No, you got Grandpa on Daddy's side, Grandpa on Mama's side. Let me be Grandpa 3 just for a day. And they get excited about that. I'm excited about that. At 92, and 2 days from now, this is April 4, the day of Kings leaving us. April 6 is my birthday in the calendar. I share that same day with a little 6-year-old friend of mine. His name is Elo. You'll hear more about Elo and his family when we talk about some of the books and the resources that we have for getting this done. But right now, I want you to know, this is why I wanted to speak to you on this day, before this day is over. And I'm praying that this word will go forward throughout the universe, wherever it will land in people's hearts, then their minds, and then their guts. And we'll do together what we must do. we're calling this, I'm a part of a group called Jubilee National Collaborative. It's convened by 3 people. Myself, Virgil Alexander Wood, really in the spirit of my grandfather, my paternal grandfather. Dr. Owen Cardwell, highly academic theologian, pastoral theologian, and Dr. James Edward Dixon of Houston, the third of Houston, who is a highly trained academic pastoral theologian. And when I say pastoral theologian, I mean a theologian that serves as a shepherd. The 3 of us have convened something called the Jubilee National Collaborative, and we're offering that now to Houston. And Dr. Dixon, the great work he is doing fabulous work in trying to save the school system of Houston. And Dr. Cardwell will be available in Houston very shortly. We'll come in for 7 days, and we will help the people of Houston, help Texas, education, association do what they ought to do. They're reluctant right now, but because they don't know the resources we bring to the table, when they understand the resources that are available, we're going to take this summer, and at the end of the summer, that Wheatley School, which could give us a Dr. Ruth Simmons, one of the great persons of our time. She ranks with all of the greats of Mary McLeod Bethune and all the rest. Dr. Ruth Simmons, one of the greats, who will be receiving the Rosa Parks Nobility of Service Award on Mother's Day. Other people receiving that award on Mother's Day this year, along with Dr. Ruth Simmons, include some of the people on Wall Street and some of the people from the back street. And we're going to have more to say about that at another time. But I just want you to know that going forward, starting on April the 26th, 27th, that's a Thursday night, I believe, whatever the Thursday night is, every Thursday night, it will be Classroom with Benjamin Mays, who was Martin Luther King's major mentor. Every Thursday night, you will have an opportunity to hear a lecture from one of the great academics on the planet, whether black, white, yellow, whatever they are. If they're academics and got good information, you will hear from them on Thursday night. And we're calling that night, thank God, it's Friday, although it's Thursday night, you see, because Friday starts in the Jewish calendar at 6 o'clock the previous day. So that's Thursday night classroom with the schoolmaster of America, Dr. Benjamin Elijah Mays. Then Saturday at noon, high noon, we will invite families together, what we call the National Kitchen Table Summit with Rosa Parks. We're inviting families, all families who want to be a part of this work, to take every Saturday and meet as a family. Prioritize that. That's the Sabbath. Prioritize your family every Saturday. We're going to share with you how you do that, and we have some literature that we can share with you almost immediately around that. And then that's Saturday at high noon, wherever you are, high noon. And then Sunday evening vesper, that's chapel and cathedral with Martin Luther King. Then you will hear an inspirational message, whether it's a sermon or just an inspirational message on Sunday evening vespers. So Thursday night, thank God it's Friday, you're hearing from a great scholar. Saturday noon, your family is gathering in the name of Rosa Parks, Family Clinic, Joyful Fellowship, all of that. And then Sunday night, vespers, when you're getting ready to go back to work on Monday morning, when people are afraid to go into Monday, more suicides on Monday than any other day of the week, because people got to go back into a hell of a situation and they go back unprepared. That's some of the work the Jubilee National Collaborative does. Let me close this by saying to you that we invite you, your children, the schools, the corporations, families, everybody, to join us in something we've been doing with Virginia Tech University at Blacksburg, Virginia, and Virginia Union University of Richmond. They brought me on as a distinguished Ritenow Fellow, faculty fellow in 2017. And since then, with the great work of Dr. Ralph Hall and at the time Dr. Ann Kademian and others whose names I could call, but I want to tell you, they enabled us to launch what we call the Beloved Community Ancestors Hall of Fame. And we looked at the break points in the American story, where we went from a predicament to prospect, where that shift happened. You had a black voice, a black presence, and a white presence working together. Abraham Lincoln and Fred Douglass, for example, or Martin Luther King, a senior, and George Wallace. That's the one you're going to really find intriguing. Daddy King and George Wallace. How Daddy King went to George Wallace and ministered to him, gave him a ticket to heaven, and he took it. And they're sitting in heaven playing chess. Oh, it may be poker, I don't know, right now, and looking down and saying, why can't our people get it right? Same thing I was privileged to do with Jerry Falwell. More about that later in those weekend Sabbaths that we'll talk about. But right now, we want you to be on the lookout for those weekends. Thank God it's Friday, and then Sunday night, thank God it's Monday. And at that table, the Martin Luther King Shepherd's Table, we are all represented, the schools, the corporations, the families, homeless people, all of us together. We are one family. And King said, we as a people, a Jubilee people, will get to the promised land. Take it from Grandpa 3, 92 years old. Tomorrow, please come and help us. God has put together the most remarkable group of people, and we understand why God never leaves us. Why God never leaves us is what we'll be exploring in these Sabbath weekends. God bless you and thank you.